My first trip, I remember having no idea what to expect.
And the experience there was just so rich and challenging because it was so out of my wheelhouse. We drove down. I remember listening to Give a Little Bit about 1,000 times in the van.
So I went to this woman, Linda's house, got to know each other pretty well. She was putting names to faces and showing me pictures. I remember at the end of our conversation, she told me, I just want you to know, please don't forget about us when you go back to Boston. I want you to take these stories with you when you're thinking about what you're doing in class.
We spent most of our time working on a house or two in the area. And I remember thinking that, like, if we're there for 1 week, how much can we really build? Somewhere in the middle of the week, the homeowner who we're building the house for showed up with their son. And it kind of like all made sense right there. You know, Appa's not really about building a house. Appa's about being with people.
Here I was, a person who had very little in my life going to Vanceburg, but I realized how much I had and how blessed I was in my own life, but how blessed the folks that we were working with were.
Even though it was a highly impoverished area, breaking bread with people who I wouldn't have encountered in my everyday, folks who didn't have the resources that I did growing up, there was still that core concept of love.
Appa was the first thing to kind of shift my framework into thinking, like, what if I were to base my whole life around the idea my humanity is tied up in that of those people around me because of the fact that we're both human, and like, how does that shift what I do and how I live my life? Almost everything I've done since my first trip in 2011, I don't think would have happened had I not decided to go to Lynchburg.
I ended up spending a year with the Jesuits with 4 of my classmates from BC. And what I realized was I had a vocation, but my desire to enter into religious life was not what I ended up doing. But I did realize that my formation and my Ignatian formation was really important, and it shaped my life.
Appa's actually evolved a lot in the last 3 years that I've done it, and I can't even imagine to look back 40 years ago and see how much we've grown since then.
The Appalachia program started, it was really the vision of Greg Casson, who graduated a couple years ahead of me, but he was my RA. And he was just this bigger-than-life person on campus, truly committed to justice. And so Appalachia began as this just dream that Greg had.
But beyond just logistically, I think Appa has grown in so many ways.
I think representation matters, and a lot has been done to increasing that sense of inclusivity and diversity within the program, within its participants as well as leadership.
With speakers we had, we really worked to make it an organization that encouraged the participants to ask really big questions of themselves and of the world, to ask questions in a way that would be and could be sustainable.
Because a lot of times the questions that we would have conversation about they're really hard and really complex, and there's no silver bullet to those problems.
Whether it's locally, globally, how are we people for justice, and how do we really go to the margins for the people who do not have what we have, and how do we shape policy going forward?
Because for me, Appa is not necessarily about that 1 week. Yes, that 1 week is important, but it's about what do you do after that 1 week? Do you continue living for others, serving others, especially those in need and those that are marginalized by society, or do you go back to living your own life?
So to see the impact 40 years later on that program, and how many lives have been transformed, and how many people have been touched by the work of the program, and how many vocations formed out of that, it's just amazing.